The building you are looking at now is the building the Coast Artillery Museum is in. It used to be a barracks building. We'll talk more about the buildings on the fort later in the video. Right now, let's start the tour with an overall look at the fort. Construction of Fort Worden began in 1897. There are 12 gun batteries, 2 wharves, and over 50 buildings by 1914. In this tour, we will divide the fort into 3 main parts. First, we will talk about the gun emplacements and structures on top of Artillery Hill. Then we will take a look at the gun emplacements surrounding the hill. After that, we'll take a closer look at the living quarters and support buildings on the fort. On top of Artillery Hill, there are 6 batteries and several critical fire control and command structures. We'll start at one end of the main gun line and work our way around the top of the hill. This is Battery Randall. It is named after Brevet Brigadier General Alanson K. Randall, who served with distinction during the Civil War. Construction on the battery began in 1900 and was completed in 1902. The battery has 2 10-inch barbette gun emplacements. The battery was decommissioned in 1918. Moving along the main gun line, this barracks building was built in 1908. It was for 218 men. The barracks was built for the headquarters battery, which had just moved from Fort Flagler. This is Fort Worden's guardhouse. The guardhouse served as the fort's jail, with a cell block that could hold 25 men. It was built in 1904. It is now the visitor center for the park. This is the fire station. It was built in 1905. This is what it looked like firing. Its field of fire at this position was only 70 degrees left and right of center. Shown here is Pit B of Battery Brannan. There are 4 Model 1890 M1 12-inch mortars here. There are 16 mortars of this kind on the fort in 1914. The mortars fired their rounds closer to vertical so that when they reached their targets, they were coming almost straight down. This was good because most of the warships of the period, while armored on the sides, still only had wooden decks. The carriage and barrel together weighed 64 tons. The maximum range firing a 1,046-pound deck-piercing shell was 11,345 yards. It took 58 men to aim for and operate the whole mortar battery. The shells could be stored on a loading table inside the battery, where they could easily be loaded onto the shell cart. Once the shell was on the shell cart, the cart was pushed right up to the breech of the mortar. The shell and the 62-pound powder charge were then rammed. The breech was then closed. The mortar was elevated to a firing position that was between 45 and 65 degrees. The mortar could be traversed through 360 degrees. The guns were fired electrically mainly, with lanyards serving as a backup firing method. After the mortar was fired, a cleaning rod was dipped in water and used to put out any smoldering embers still in the powder chamber, to prevent premature explosion of the powder for the next round. This was done as a safety measure. Once the cleaning was finished, the gun was ready for reload.